Chapter 1. The Unlikely Encounter. The city of New Haven sprawled across the horizon, a gleaming metropolis of neon lights, towering skyscrapers, and streets constantly humming with the sound of hovercars and crowded marketplaces. New Haven had everything, and yet, at the same time, it felt like a city that had forgotten its roots. It was the future bright, shiny, and polished, and yet, amidst all the advanced technology and gleaming architecture, there existed pockets of the past. One such place was the Rusty Wrench, a small mechanic shop on the outskirts of town that somehow managed to survive in a world that seemed to care less and less about things that broke. The city around it evolved faster than ever before, from autonomous drones zipping through the sky to machines that could fix themselves. Everything was sleek, everything was efficient, everything was perfect, except the Rusty Wrench. The shop had been there for as long as Jack Stewart could remember. His father, a seasoned mechanic with a reputation for being able to fix anything, had run the place before him. But when Jax had taken over the family business after his father passed away unexpectedly, the world had changed so much that even the most dedicated mechanic had started to feel out of place. The city didn't need manual labor anymore. It didn't need human repairmen with grease-stained hands and patience for broken engines. It didn't need Jack Stewart, who had always been more a misfit than a prodigy in the mechanical world. His father had been an expert, a legend in the old-school, hands-on repair business, but Jax had never quite lived up to that reputation. Jax wasn't a genius like his father had been. He didn't fix things in half the time with a slick movement of his hand. He made mistakes, sometimes big ones, and spent hours fixing them. But where Jax failed, he also learned slowly, methodically, and always with a stubbornness that drove him to finish what he started, no matter how long it took. There was an artistry to it, a certain beauty in the way he had learned to fix things. But that artistry had become irrelevant in New Haven, a city that no longer cared for broken things. The hovercar industries had automated most repairs, and most people relied on AI-controlled devices to do what Jax could have done in half the time. As a result, the Rusty Wrench had become a relic, a dusty corner of the city's forgotten past. Despite the odds, Jax kept the shop open, stubbornly holding on to his family's legacy. The truth was, he didn't know how to do anything else. He had tried to work a corporate job, tried to fit into the shiny new world, but there was something about the grease, the noise, and the challenge of fixing something that felt broken that Jax could never walk away from. It was in his blood. The sense of satisfaction that came from turning a rusted engine into something that hummed like new was irreplaceable. The world outside may have moved on, but Jax Stewart had not. The Rusty Wrench was his home, his life, and the only place where he truly felt like he belonged. It was just after dusk when the first unusual sound broke the monotony of Jax's evening. The shop was quiet, save for the soft hum of the neon lights flickering above, casting an eerie glow over the cluttered workbenches and half-finished projects. Jax was hunched over a rusted hoverbike, its ignition system in need of a serious overhaul. He wiped the sweat from his brow and leaned in closer to inspect the wiring, his hands greasy from the various tools he had been using all day. He had spent hours on this thing, and though it was far from perfect, he could feel that small, nagging sense of satisfaction. It was almost done, but then, just as he was about to tighten the last bolt, a distant rumble filled the air. It wasn't the usual sounds of traffic or the hum of machinery in the distance. This was something different, something louder, deeper, a mechanical roar that made the very ground vibrate beneath his feet. Jack stood up, startled by the sound, and wiped his hands on a rag, instinctively moving to the window. Through the grimy glass, he saw it. The source of the noise was coming from the street, rapidly approaching the Rusty Wrench. The machine was massive, an enormous hoverbike that seemed to defy the very laws of physics with its growl. Its body was painted in a dark, almost metallic purple, with thick chrome pipes snaking across its surface. The bike looked like something out of a futuristic nightmare, a hulking, aggressive, almost angry thing, with wheels built more like treads, and engines that looked capable of tearing through anything in its path. The bike wasn't just big, it was imposing, and it was heading straight for Jax's shop. As it slowed to a stop just outside the Rusty Wrench, Jax could make out the rider, a figure dressed in heavy, dark leathers, its helmet reflecting the dying sunlight in a twisted, alien fashion. The rider was tall, far taller than any human Jax had ever seen. The figure's broad shoulders and imposing frame stood in stark contrast to the sleek, delicate machines Jax was used to working on. There was an aura of otherworldliness to the rider, something that made Jax's instincts flare up with caution, but also curiosity. The air around the figure crackled with an undeniable energy that felt almost electric. Jax watched as the figure dismounted the bike, its movements slow but purposeful. The rider was not human. Jax could tell that immediately. Its skin had a pale, almost metallic sheen, and though it wore a full-face helmet, the way it moved was unmistakably alien. The creature wasn't just a traveler. It looked like someone who had seen many worlds, someone who had lived through countless battles, someone who didn't belong to this planet. And yet, there it stood, right in front of Jax's shop. The rider turned toward the door, and before Jax could even think to call out or step forward, the alien raised one hand and pushed open the door. The loud creak of the hinges echoed throughout the shop, cutting through the silence like a knife. Jax couldn't help but blink in disbelief. This was no ordinary customer. This wasn't someone who had just happened to break down on the side of the road. "Need help?" Jax asked, his voice rough, unsure whether he was speaking to a being that could even understand him. The alien tilted its head, the glint of its helmet catching the last rays of the sun. It said nothing at first, simply standing there in the doorway, staring at Jax as if measuring him. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity, and Jax's nerves were beginning to fray. He wasn't sure what to expect, but he certainly didn't expect the figure to speak in a language that sounded like a growl mixed with static. "I need assistance," the alien said, its voice distorted, but unmistakably understandable. "My bike damaged. I seek repairs." Jax blinked, slightly taken aback. The alien's voice was rough, metallic, like it had spent a lifetime in a world of exhaust fumes and mechanical roars. The fact that it had come to him for help of all people was beyond Jax's comprehension. He wasn't the best mechanic in New Haven. Far from it. In fact, most of the high-paying jobs and corporate contracts went to the automated repair facilities downtown. Yet here was this towering, otherworldly figure, asking him, the failed human mechanic, to fix its broken bike. "Well, you've come to the right place," Jax said, trying to mask his surprise with a confident smile. "I may not be the best in the city, but I sure know how to fix an engine or two. Come on in." The alien stepped into the shop, towering over the workbenches and cluttered tools. It paused briefly, looking around as if it had never seen anything quite like the humble setup Jax had. Its eyes, if they could be called eyes, flickered with a strange light as it took in the environment. Jax cleared his throat, trying to make himself feel more at ease, but the strange, intense presence of the alien left him feeling somewhat small. "All right, let's have a look at your bike," he said, gesturing toward the imposing machine outside. The alien gave a brief nod, following Jax out the door and over to the vehicle. Jax's gaze locked on the bike as they approached it, and his heart skipped a beat. The machine was even more magnificent up close, sleek, gleaming, and far more advanced than anything Jax had ever worked on. He had no idea what kind of technology this thing ran on, but he could feel the power surging beneath its surface, the kind of energy that felt ancient and untouchable. "All right, let's see what's going on with it," Jax muttered under his breath as he knelt down beside the bike. The alien stepped back, giving Jax space, but watching him closely. Jax's fingers brushed against the cool metal of the bike's undercarriage, and as they did, a faint electrical pulse ran through his fingertips, causing him to jerk his hand back instinctively. It was unlike anything he had ever felt before. This wasn't just any motorcycle. This was a piece of alien technology, a marvel of engineering from a world far beyond his comprehension. He wasn't sure what exactly he was looking for, but Jax wasn't about to back down. He might not have had the experience with machines of this caliber, but he was a mechanic. He could figure it out. Jax's pulse quickened as he examined the intricate systems that lined the underside of the alien bike. His fingers traced over glowing panels, circuit boards that didn't belong to anything on Earth. He wasn't sure what kind of material these components were made of, but they seemed to pulse with life, a strange energy coursing through them, like a heartbeat. He could feel the bike's power, and it was unlike anything he'd ever encountered. His usual troubleshooting tools seemed almost useless in comparison to this machine. But Jax had never been one to give up easily. "Well, let's see what we've got here," Jax muttered under his breath, pulling out a set of basic tools from his workbench. He started with the engine just like he would with any regular bike, although he knew deep down that this was no ordinary repair. The alien didn't seem in a hurry. It stood back, watching Jax with a curious, almost calculating expression, its glowing eyes never leaving the mechanic. There was a heaviness to the silence, an unspoken weight that made Jax feel both honored and unnerved at the same time. As Jax worked, he could feel the alien's presence growing more intense, as if the very air around him had thickened. It wasn't just the physical size of the biker. It was something else, something more primal, more powerful, that made Jax feel like he was dealing with a force far beyond his comprehension. He could sense it in the way the alien's gaze never faltered, the way it stood so still, yet exuded an unearthly energy. The hours stretched on as Jax carefully worked on the bike. Every part he touched seemed to hum with energy, almost as though it was resisting his efforts, but he pressed on. He had learned, over the years, that sometimes fixing things wasn't about knowing exactly how to handle every part. It was about patience, ingenuity, and figuring out how to make what's broken work again. His hands worked methodically, loosening bolts and checking wiring, his mind racing through every possible scenario. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Jax reached a point where he was ready to test the engine. He turned the key, pressing his hand to the cold metal of the bike's body, and with a deep breath, he pressed the ignition. The bike's engine roared to life, the sound deafening in the otherwise silent shop. But it wasn't just a roar, it was a guttural, mechanical growl that felt more like an awakening than a simple startup. The bike trembled under Jax's hands, the panels around him vibrating with power. He had no idea what kind of fuel system this thing used, but the engine fired up without hesitation, and the hum that followed felt like it was shaking the very foundations of the rusty wrench. The alien moved forward, its eyes glowing brighter now, as if in approval or perhaps recognition. It reached out, running a hand over the surface of the bike, as if acknowledging the repair with a sense of gratitude or understanding. It didn't speak at first, just stood there, studying the machine, and then finally turned to Jax. "You fixed it," the alien said, its voice still distorted, but a hint of something resembling satisfaction beneath the static. "Not many can do this. You are not like the others." Jax wiped the sweat from his forehead, still reeling from the intense energy that had coursed through him during the repair. He wasn't sure if he was being complimented or just recognized as some kind of anomaly. Either way, the words felt like a strange weight pressing down on him. "I'm just a mechanic," Jax said, trying to sound casual, though his heart was still racing from the adrenaline of fixing a bike that could have easily been classified as a weapon of war. "I fix things. Not sure what's so special about me." The alien didn't respond immediately. Instead, it stepped back and gave a low hum, a sound that seemed to come from within its very chest. It tilted its head slightly, as if considering Jax's words, before raising a hand, palm out, in what might have been a gesture of acknowledgement or respect. It was hard to tell with creatures from other worlds. Jax had no idea how to interpret the body language, but one thing was clear. The alien was not like any customer he had ever had, and the weight of its presence in the shop was enough to make Jax feel like he was standing at the edge of something far larger than himself. "You have done what others could not," the alien said finally, its voice clearer now, though still distorted. "You have proven that the human spirit is more than just a tool to be used. It is something else." Jax swallowed, his thoughts racing. "I don't know what you mean." The alien didn't answer right away. Instead, it stepped closer, its massive form looming over Jax. There was a strange, palpable force in the air now, and Jax couldn't help but feel that something significant was about to happen. The alien's eyes glowed brighter, and the energy around them seemed to shift. "Your people are weak," the alien said, "but they are resilient. And that is why I am here." The words hit Jax like a punch to the gut. "What do you want from me?" he asked, feeling a mix of fear and curiosity gnawing at his insides. The alien's gaze softened, just slightly, and its voice lowered, almost with a hint of something like pity. "I need you to understand, human. The world you know is not as it seems. There are forces beyond your comprehension, forces that control the galaxy, forces that will not hesitate to destroy you. But I see something in you. Something different. You are not like the others. You have the potential to understand what is coming. The power you just fixed is a gift that will take you farther than you ever imagined. Jax could feel the weight of the alien's words settling on his shoulders. What was it talking about? What did it mean by forces beyond comprehension? And why was it choosing him of all people? The alien stepped back, and for the first time, Jax saw a glimmer of something like sadness or perhaps resignation behind its glowing eyes. You will not be able to avoid it. It is coming. You will have to choose. Jax stood still, unable to form a response. The alien didn't elaborate, but the words hung in the air like a dark cloud. And as the alien began to move toward the door, Jax realized that his life had just changed forever. This wasn't just about fixing bikes anymore. This was about something far larger, something that would pull him into the heart of a conflict he couldn't yet understand. The alien paused at the doorway, its massive frame silhouetted against the dim light of the setting sun. It turned back toward Jax. "You have earned the gift of knowledge," it said, "but you will have to decide what to do with it. I cannot help you further. But when the time comes, you will know what to do." With that, the alien mounted its bike, revving the engine to life once more. The growl of the machine was deafening, and before Jax could say anything else, the alien sped off into the horizon, disappearing into the night. The sound of its engine faded slowly, leaving Jax standing alone in the middle of his shop, his thoughts spinning. The rusty wrench was still the same, the cluttered workbenches, the dusty shelves, the pile of half-finished projects, but Jax knew, deep down, that nothing would ever be the same again. Chapter 2. The Path Ahead. The days following the alien's visit were a blur. Jax spent most of his time at the rusty wrench, trying to keep his mind occupied with the familiar tasks of repairing and maintaining the few clients he had left. The encounter with the alien, their conversation, the strange words that had been spoken, and the feeling of immense power and weight that had lingered in the air kept circling in his mind like a persistent echo. What had the alien meant? What was this gift it spoke of? And why had it chosen him? Jax had always been a dreamer, but this was something else entirely. There was no logical explanation for what had happened. He was a failed mechanic, a guy who couldn't even get a hovercar's ignition system to work properly without a few mistakes. He wasn't some galactic hero or some chosen one. He was just Jack Stewart, the guy who fixed old bikes in a dusty shop. But the more he tried to push the thoughts away, the more they seemed to demand attention. His curiosity gnawed at him. What was the alien talking about when it mentioned forces beyond comprehension? Was it referring to the Galactic Empire it had hinted at? And why had it said he had the potential to understand what was coming? Jax didn't have answers, but one thing was clear. He couldn't keep going through life pretending this was all just a coincidence. He had to learn more. He had to understand what this alien was talking about, and why it had decided to give him a gift or burden him with one, depending on how you looked at it. The shop was quieter than usual when Jax stepped into the back room, where his father's old tools were stored. He hadn't touched them in years, but something felt right about looking through them now. He ran his fingers over the worn handles of screwdrivers and wrenches, his father's tools that had seen more than their fair share of broken engines. But now, in the silence of the rusty wrench, those tools felt like a connection to something bigger, something that had always been just out of reach. Jax didn't know what was coming, but he felt that it was inevitable, and he had to be ready. The path ahead wasn't clear, but for the first time in a long while, Jax felt a sense of purpose. He was no longer just fixing broken machines. He was standing on the edge of something far greater, something that would push him beyond everything he had ever known. And there was no turning back. The days began to blur together for Jax, each one heavier than the last. He kept himself occupied with work at the rusty wrench, but his mind wasn't in the shop anymore. Every wrench he turned, every part he soldered, felt hollow. The mechanic in him was still there, but he was no longer just a simple technician. Something larger had taken root in his mind, something strange and undeniable. The visit from the alien had ignited a fire inside him, one that was impossible to ignore. The city around him continued its robotic march into the future, sleek, polished, and automated, while Jax remained tethered to a world that had almost no use for men like him. Every day, he passed the high-tech shops in New Haven, filled with shiny machines that fixed themselves and AI assistants that performed every menial task with mechanical precision. The city had no place for someone who got his hands dirty, who repaired rusted bikes and cars by hand, who loved the clunky, imperfect beauty of human-made things. The future had arrived in New Haven, and it had left him behind. Yet, somehow, the world he had known, the world of grease, metal, and sweat, was now more relevant than ever. It was as if the universe was telling him that his small, forgotten corner of existence held a purpose far greater than he could have imagined. Jax had spent the better part of the last week trying to make sense of the aliens' cryptic words. He hadn't heard a thing from the mysterious riders since their encounter, and his shop had remained eerily quiet, as if waiting for something to happen. He kept replaying the aliens' final words in his mind. You will have to choose. What choice? What path was he supposed to take? He was a failed mechanic, barely scraping by. What could he possibly do in the face of an entire galactic empire and forces beyond his comprehension? That night, as the stars began to blink in the sky above the city, Jax found himself standing in the same spot where the alien had first appeared, staring out at the flickering neon lights and the distant hum of hovercars. The world seemed vast, and for the first time, Jax felt small, like a single grain of sand on a beach that stretched out to the edges of the universe. His father's legacy, the shop, the work he had done, none of it felt important in comparison to what the alien had hinted at. Yet, despite the overwhelming fear that gripped him, Jax knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to walk away from this. The next morning, as Jax wiped the sleep from his eyes and dragged himself into the shop, the silence was thick in the air. It was as if the entire city was holding its breath, waiting for something to break the monotony. And it did, in a way Jax didn't expect. As he walked through the front door, a faint whirring sound filled the air, like the hum of an engine revving just beyond the horizon. Jax paused, his heart skipping a beat. He knew that sound. It was the same growl of the alien's bike from days ago. It was unmistakable. But this time, it was different. This time, it wasn't a lone figure approaching. This time, it was a convoy. Jax rushed to the window, his eyes wide in disbelief. Out on the street, he saw them. A dozen or more massive, hulking bikes, each one similar to the aliens, but larger, more menacing, and each piloted by beings just as tall and imposing as the one who had visited him. They were like a moving wall of chrome and alien energy, filling the streets with a dark presence that sent a chill down Jax's spine. The convoy wasn't here by accident. They were coming for him. The bikes screeched to a halt in front of the rusty wrench, their engines roaring with an unearthly growl as they powered down. The riders dismounted, each of them wearing the same dark, reflective helmets that the first alien had worn. The leader of the convoy, a figure far taller than any human and radiating an almost oppressive aura, stepped forward, the ground beneath his feet seeming to vibrate with every step. His armor gleamed under the artificial light, glowing faintly with an energy Jax couldn't begin to understand. This was no random visit. This was the beginning of something far larger than Jax had ever imagined. One of the riders stepped forward and, with a voice that sounded like thunder wrapped in static, spoke. "Jax Stewart," the voice boomed. "You have been chosen. You have proven yourself worthy. It is time to come with us." Jax's heart thudded in his chest. He had no idea what they wanted from him, or what had prompted their arrival. But one thing was certain. This was the moment the alien had spoken of, the moment where everything he had known would change. His hands trembled, but he fought the fear that threatened to take over. They were here, and they were asking him to come with them. He had no choice. He had always been a mechanic and outsider in his own city, but now, in the face of this alien convoy, he was being pulled into a battle far greater than anything he had ever known. With a deep breath, Jax nodded, stepping forward to meet them. "I'm ready," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos swirling in his mind. The alien leader nodded slowly, and with a gesture, the convoy began to move. They led Jax to one of the massive bikes, their forms towering over him as they walked. The leader handed him a small, glowing device, a communication tool. Jax assumed and instructed him to strap it on. "You will learn much," the alien said as they approached the convoy's ship, a massive vessel hovering just above the ground. "The galaxy is not what you think. And you, Jax Stewart, are about to learn your place in it." Chapter 3, Into the Unknown. The journey beyond New Haven was like nothing Jax had ever experienced. The streets of the city quickly faded into the distance as the convoy roared through the landscape, the ground vibrating beneath the massive engines of the alien bikes. Jax's mind raced as the towering figures around him moved with a practiced efficiency, their eyes fixed on some distant goal. He had no idea what that goal was, but as they sped across the alien terrain, he knew deep down that his life, as he had known it, was over. The alien convoy didn't stop for anything. They moved swiftly through the rolling hills and barren wastelands, the sun dipping low on the horizon as they cut through the desolate landscape. The vehicle Jax was riding in was equipped with a shield generator and advanced stabilization technology, making the ride smoother than he could have imagined. But the real strangeness came from the silence that surrounded him. These beings, so different from humans, did not speak. They didn't need to. The very presence they exuded was enough to convey all that needed to be said. The convoy's leader, who Jax now understood was some sort of high-ranking officer, never looked back at him. Instead, he focused entirely on the path ahead, his body language demanding respect and attention without ever needing to utter a word. Every once in a while, Jax would catch glimpses of their helmets shifting, the reflective surfaces glinting in the fading light, but the air was still, heavy with expectation. After what seemed like hours, they finally arrived at a massive, looming structure. It was unlike anything Jax had ever seen, an enormous fortress, built of materials that didn't look like anything he'd ever come across. The walls were alive, shifting with strange, pulsating patterns. Massive gates opened before them, revealing an even larger interior, lit by an eerie, unnatural glow. Jax's heart pounded in his chest as they led him inside. "This is where you will learn," the convoy leader said, his voice echoing through the vast hall. "Here, you will discover the truth of what you have awakened. And when the time comes, you will know what to do." Jax stepped forward, the weight of the unknown pressing down on him. He didn't know what he was about to face, but one thing was certain: he had been thrust into a conflict that was far beyond him. He wasn't just a failed mechanic anymore. He was now a part of something larger, something dangerous, something that would take him to the very heart of the galaxy. And there was no turning back. The fortress loomed over Jax, its spires stretching high into the sky, a web of living technology pulsating with an eerie, otherworldly glow. The walls were made of a strange, organic metal that shimmered with a spectral light, and Jax could feel the hum of energy in the air, vibrating through his skin and bones. The structure seemed alive, breathing in sync with the pulse of the galaxy, its heart beating in time with the strange forces that surrounded them. It was clear that this place wasn't just a physical structure, it was a piece of something much larger, a machine, a living organism that stretched across time and space. As Jax stepped through the massive gates, he felt the weight of the world now, the universe pressed down on him. The air was thick with a sense of inevitability. The alien convoy flanked him, their towering figures casting long shadows across the metallic floor. Their silence was overwhelming, and the tension in the air grew thicker with every step they took toward the heart of the fortress. Jax didn't know where he was going or what he was walking into, but he knew that this was the beginning of something that would change the course of his life and the course of the galaxy itself. The hall they entered was vast, a cavernous space lined with towering columns of alien design. The walls were covered in strange symbols, pulsing with an ethereal glow, their meanings lost to Jax, though their energy was undeniable. They walked in silence, their footsteps echoing through the hall, until they reached a large chamber in the center of the fortress. It was a place unlike anything Jax had ever seen, vast, open, and illuminated by a swirling, shifting light that seemed to come from the very walls themselves. The floor was covered in a network of glowing lines, which seemed to shift and change as they walked over them, like they were part of a living, breathing circuit. At the center of the room stood a throne, a massive chair carved from a substance that seemed to shimmer and pulse with life. And sitting in the chair, surrounded by a swarm of alien attendants, was the leader of this strange race. This was not the same figure who had spoken to Jax earlier. This was something far more imposing, far more regal. The alien was enormous, towering even over the others, and its presence seemed to fill the room. Its skin was an iridescent shade of deep violet, and its eyes, glowing with an unnatural light, fixed on Jax with an intensity that made him feel as though he were being measured, weighed, and found wanting. The convoy leader stepped forward and knelt before the throne, the rest of the riders following suit. Jax felt the weight of their actions, the reverence they showed to this being, and it was hard to shake the feeling that he was standing on the precipice of something that had been set in motion long before his birth. The alien leader raised a hand, and the room fell into an eerie silence. It was a silence that seemed to stretch out, as though the very air was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Jax Stewart. The leader's voice rang out, deep and resonant, filling the chamber with a force that left no room for doubt. You have been chosen by the stars. Your actions have awakened the forces that have long been dormant, forces that will reshape the course of history. You, who are from a distant world, have proven that the human spirit is capable of more than mere survival. But now, you must understand what is at stake. Jax swallowed hard, trying to make sense of the words. The alien was speaking of things far beyond his comprehension, of forces beyond anything he could have imagined. His mind raced, but there was one question that burned through everything else. Why him? Why had the alien chosen him? He was just a mechanic, a man who couldn't even fix a simple hoverbike without making mistakes. What could he possibly offer to a galaxy that seemed to already be at the brink of something monumental? You stand at the crossroads of destiny, the alien leader continued, its voice resonating in the room like a deep bell tolling. Your actions will determine the fate of your world, of many worlds. The Empire has risen, and the galaxy is at war. It is a war that will shape the future of all races. And you, Jax Stewart, will play a part in that future. The question is, will you rise to meet your destiny, or will you fall, as so many others have? The weight of the words hung in the air like a heavy fog, and Jax felt the full force of them settle on his chest. His thoughts swirled, and for a moment, he couldn't speak. The idea that he, a simple mechanic, could have any say in the fate of the galaxy seemed impossible. But the alien had said it. He had been chosen, and now, somehow, he had to live up to it. But how? The alien leader's eyes glowed brighter, and Jax could feel a shift in the energy of the room. You will be tested. The path ahead will not be easy. You will face trials of mind, of spirit, and of body. You will be challenged in ways you cannot yet understand. But the gift you have been given, the knowledge you will gain, will prepare you for what is to come. Jax took a deep breath, steeling himself. The fear and doubt were still there, but beneath it, something else began to stir. Something that felt like determination, like the spark of something bigger than himself. Maybe he wasn't just a failure after all. Maybe he could do this. He didn't know how, but he had to try. I'm ready, Jax said, his voice steady but with a deep resolve. I don't understand all of this, but I won't back down. The alien leader nodded, and for the first time, Jax saw a glimmer of what might have been approval in its eyes. Then you have taken the first step, the leader said. The trials will begin now. You will be guided, but the choice will always be yours. Remember, Jax Stewart, the galaxy is vast, and its fate is tied to your actions. Rise or fall. With that, the alien leader raised its hand, and the room erupted with light. The symbols on the floor shifted, and the energy in the room seemed to crackle with power. Jax felt a sudden, overwhelming sense of vertigo, like the very fabric of reality was stretching around him. And then, in an instant, the world around him shifted. Chapter 4, The Final Choice. Jax staggered, his vision spinning as he tried to regain his bearings. The strange energy in the air seemed to crackle around him, like the very atmosphere was charged with the weight of the decision he had just made. The room around him had transformed once again. Gone were the glowing columns and towering walls of the alien fortress. Instead, Jax found himself standing on a massive, open platform, the stars above him stretching out into infinity. The ground beneath him was smooth and metallic, and all around him, massive structures rose into the sky, pulsing with the same strange, otherworldly energy. He wasn't alone. The alien leader stood beside him, and around them were dozens of other figures, some familiar, some completely alien. They were all waiting for something. For Jax. You are here now, the alien leader's voice echoed, somehow louder than before. This is where your choice will be made. The trials ahead will test you in ways you cannot imagine. You must face them, or your world will be lost. Jax took a deep breath, his mind racing. He had come this far. He had already made his choice to stand, to fight. But now he was facing something far more dangerous than he could have ever anticipated. The trials would not be easy. The weight of the galaxy was on his shoulders, and he was about to be thrust into a battle he didn't understand. But as he stood there, looking out into the vastness of the galaxy, he realized something. He wasn't alone. He had allies, even if they were beings from another world. And he had something they didn't: a humanity, a resilience, a stubbornness that had kept him going even when everything seemed impossible. "I'm ready," Jack said again, his voice firm. "I may not know what's coming, but I will do whatever it takes." The alien leader nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of its mouth. "Then the trials begin now." As the alien spoke those words, the world around Jax shifted once again, and he was plunged into darkness. But Jax didn't flinch. He didn't back down. He had made his choice. He would face the unknown, whatever came next, and whatever it took to save his world, he would rise to meet it. And this time, failure was no longer an option.